All right, let's start National Football League draft. It's a couple of hours from now since we've launched here on a Thursday in our studios in San Diego. Let's talk about the top of the draft board. But before we do that, the Baltimore Ravens stole the headlines within the last hour.
Oh.
They signed quarterback Lamar Jackson to a record high contract, 5 years, 260, 179 million guaranteed, full no trade clause. So they finally came to a solution. Lamar Jackson came to the realization he was not going to get a max guaranteed contract, but what he got was 260 million, 179 of it guaranteed against injury, which means he's gotten 4 years guaranteed. And a no trade clause. It makes him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. So he now vaults by Jalen Hurts, who signed a $250 contract last week. Those two guys have jumped beyond Deshaun Watson, who got $230 from Cleveland a year ago. And still out there, we have to see what happens with Joe Burrow, Cincinnati, Justin Herbert, Chargers. So the price tag on quarterbacks continues to go up and up and up. So how are the Baltimore Ravens sweeping by the headlines of the NFL draft to do this on the day of the draft?
Well, they probably just want to lock them in, so they got their quarterback settled, and then they can focus in other areas on the draft. But Jalen Hurts was what, $51 million per year? So, Lamar Jackson's 50 what?
Probably 52-ish.
52-ish. So, good for those guys, man. They're earning their money.
Okay, let's talk about the NFL draft board, and we're going to do it a little bit differently here. Not necessarily predicting the first round, but I'll tell you what I've gathered information-wise from the network of people that I spend my life on email with as to how this whole thing will fall. Carolina chooses number 1. This has been a great debate in Winston-Salem, Raleigh-Durham, and Charlotte. What should they do? The owner has really carried the day. David Tepper had indicated to Frank Reich, I want you to take Bryce Young, Alabama. The owner injected himself into the meetings, not just watching him at his pro day at Ohio State, not just at the NFL Combine in Indy. He went to Tuscaloosa, met with Nick Saban. He met with his parents, Bryce Young's parents in Alabama. So it looks as if this is a lock. Bryce Young, despite the fact he's 5'10", 190, is going to be the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. Good for them. This whole draft is going to spin based on what happens at number 2. Left hand tells me Houston is still shopping that pick hard. Who would like to trade for the other quarterback, C.J. Stroud? The right hand tells me DeMeco Ryans is calling the shots, the new head coach, former defensive coordinator, San Francisco. I think they're going to draft defense rather than trade out of the slot. Now, the question is, who do they take? Certain segment of the Houston hierarchy wants Will Anderson at 17.5 quarterback sacks at Alabama. Big, strong pass rusher, can be a stand-up linebacker, can be a 3-point down defensive end. Other group says there's a certain segment there that wants Tyree Wilson, very good pass rusher, monster season at Texas Tech, who's probably got bigger growth upside, but he is a down guy every down. If you're asking me, I think Houston takes Will Anderson out of Alabama, but it wouldn't shock me if they took the other guy. Let's go to number 3. Let's go to Arizona, and this is where it gets sticky. Arizona's talked to 6 to 7 different teams that want to jump into the 3rd slot and take C.J. Stroud, the Ohio State quarterback. And the latest, and to me this is a big drop, is Tennessee at 11. Tennessee at 11 would have to really pay a steep price. And philosophically, does Arizona want to drop from 3 all the way back to 11? Now, granted, it's a good first round, but that's a heck of a drop. But maybe it's offset if you get a bunch of different assets like, John, give me your 1. John, give me your 2. John, give me your 4. If you want me to go from 3 down to 11, John, you're going to have to overpay. So that's where we are with the Arizona situation. If they stay where they are at 3, I think they're going to take Tyree Wilson, the defensive end from Texas Tech, because Will Anderson had gone to Houston. At number 4, can you imagine the Colts sitting there and waiting to see if the world's going to jump in front of them? If this thing goes the way I'm projecting, C.J. Stroud, Indianapolis Colts, have not had a quarterback to build on in the last 5 years. Ever since Andrew Luck retired, they went through Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, 1-year rental. Obviously, they tried really hard with C.J. Wentz. That didn't work. Then they rented Matt Ryan. That was even worse because the team fell apart around the quarterback. Can you imagine if Irsay winds up with C.J. Stroud without having to overpay or move out of the fourth slot to jump ahead? So keep that in mind. That could happen in Indianapolis. That's the feeling. That's the way that's going to fall. Number 5 is Seattle. They've looked at a lot of different ideas. They've tried to rebuild this team. It didn't work initially. Then they traded Russell Wilson, got a ton of assets to make that deal happen. I think they're going to take the Georgia defensive tackle, Jalen Carter. Now, there's some issues about character here, but he's a stud. He's as big as a cement block, and he's active at defensive tackle. And knowing Pete Carroll's history of dealing with problem players, I think they solved this Jalen Carter situation despite the things that he got involved with at the end of the season, the fatal auto accident with a teammate while they were drag racing and all that. I think Seattle takes Jalen Carter, and he becomes the anchor in their defensive front. Number 6 is Detroit. All kinds of rumors. Is Detroit going to trade back, get more picks? Is Detroit going to make a move maybe to get the quarterback of the future to replace Jared Goff? I don't think so. This is such a really good defensive draft, and the Lions have had a lot of problems with guys in the secondary. They've drafted high players, and they can't keep them healthy, and they've had to move some of the guys because of cap issues. I think Detroit stays where they are at 6, and I think they take Devin Witherspoon, very good cover corner from the University of Illinois. That brings us to the Raiders, the silver and black. Stop laughing. That's true. What I do not understand is the Raiders spending all this time evaluating all these quarterbacks when you gave Jimmy Garoppolo $67 million to come be your guy to replace the guy you didn't want, Derek Carr, and you wound up trading him to New Orleans. Raiders definitely need defense, and then a little bit more defense. If I'm the Raiders, I take the best cornerback that's on the board. I think they would have loved to have had a shot at Jalen Carter, but Seattle was going to take him. So the Raiders at 7, I'm going to project Christian Gonzalez, really good athlete, University of Oregon, maybe the best cover corner a very good Oregon Ducks program has had in a long period of time. Atlanta's at 8. They can go in a lot of different directions. The fact that the quarterbacks, the top 2 guys are off the board, and I never thought there was any validity to the rumors Atlanta would trade from 8 up to get to the 2nd or 3rd pick so they could take C.J. Stroud. Price would have been too steep. I think Atlanta does one of 2 things. They have a desperate need for a pass rusher, desperate need for offensive tackle, and then the weird part is the conversation. Maybe they take the heavy-duty running back out of Texas, Bijan Robinson, instead. So there could be something screwy going on in Atlanta, sitting there at 8. I'm going to have Atlanta take Paris Johnson, the massive tackle from Ohio State, because they really need to fix their offensive line. That brings us to 9, Chicago. Chicago had traded out of number 1, stockpile picks. I think Chicago is going to take the next best offensive tackle who's really good, Peter Skoronski from Northwestern University. And then at 10, we got Philadelphia. And there's a rumbling out there that Philadelphia is going to take the Texas running back, Bijan Robinson. But there is another reality. They need to continue to build and get younger in the defensive front. And the next really good defensive lineman there is Nolan Smith, the defensive end from the University of Georgia. So that's the projection I have right now of the top 10 picks. But everything swings on what they do in Houston at 2 or what they do in the midst of all this chaos in Phoenix with the Arizona Cardinals at 3. Because if somebody trades back, that's going to mean the dominoes might start to fall a different way. So that's just a quick look at the top of the draft board. John, I threw a volume of information at you. You're out there in left field. Move some of it around. Stand up and tell me what you think.
Well, I mean, it's incredible how many great players there are in this draft. But we spent so much time talking about the quarterbacks, and there were 5 or 6 of them that we thought could be, first round, second round picks. But there's only 2 in the top 10 on your list. So I'm wondering if there's going to be more trades, if other teams are going to try to move up and secure some of those quarterbacks.
I don't think so, John, because it's such a deep draft defensively The third quarterback on the board is Will Levis from Kentucky. Now, he could jump into the top 10. At one point, people thought maybe top 5. That's because there's so many great defensive players who come in and play immediately versus the quarterback you got to develop. That's why I don't think he's a top 5 quarterback. But Will Levis is there. And then Anthony Richardson from Florida, who's a freak athlete, but is really an uncut gem. That's a developmental project. I think there will be 4, excuse me, maybe the 5th quarterback of Herndon Hooker from Tennessee gets drafted. There could be 5 QBs, but this is such a deep draft defensively. And then you add on the massive quality offensive linemen. And then at the back end of the draft, there'll start to be a run on the wide receivers. That's why I don't think you see a huge push that we've got to take 5 quarterbacks in the first 10 picks, because I don't think there's 5 quarterbacks in the first 10 picks that warrant being chosen that high, being paid that amount of money, because if you drafted them, you're going to have to play them. And some of these guys are nowhere near ready. So I think there'll be a couple quarterbacks mid-round and then at the back of the round, but there's so many really good defensive players, offensive linemen, and then the package, select group of wide receivers. That's why there haven't been quarterbacks taken. Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
Next